What is up, guys? Again, NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we're taking a look at the Dark Knight Succession build PvE guide after the reboots that we just got. I've been able to spend enough time at this point that I'm comfortable with go ahead and putting some things together. I do expect that we'll have some changes in the near future, tweaks and things that may alter this a bit, but for the time being, this is what we've got going with Succession. That seems to be working quite well. If you're looking for the Awakening guide, obviously I need to spend as much time as I spent on Succession with Awakening, make sure I give everything a fair shot all the way through before I go ahead and start putting out skill rotations and add-ons and that sort of thing until then. Also want to mention before we jump into the add-ons shortly here is to keep in mind that add-on builds, you should actually use hand-in-hand with your skill rotation. So if you're using a slightly different skill rotation than what I'm recommending to use, which is totally fine, but you want to adjust your add-ons accordingly. Optimal add-ons for a PvE rotation need to be mapped out so that you're getting the proper buffs along with those. So I don't really recommend, if you're going to tweak the rotation or tweak the add-ons, you want to make sure that matches each other along with it. Don't copy the add-ons and then skip the rotation, or use the rotation but use different add-ons outside of just a few things. So just want to throw that out there. Also, the other thing, as I always say in these videos, this isn't the end all be all. Obviously there are other options. You may find something that works a little better for you. FPS is a relevant thing, at least to some extent, on some skills, so you may find that something works better suited for you. This is what I've had the most success getting, most trash per hour. Between most testing done here was Bloody Monastery and then also Sycraia, to keep a little RNG out of the factors that the Bloody Monastery has, but these have performed the best for me after tweaking a lot. I went through a lot of iterations of mostly add-ons. The skill rotation was fairly simple. But with that said, let me go ahead and get the skill add-ons up. Let's go ahead and talk about these and then go through it from here. And I'll mention a few things that can be swapped out, kind of depending on preference or what you particularly like. So if we look at, first up we have on here Airstrike. On this one we've got minus 15 DP and back attack damage plus 3%. Kind of seems a little out of place. The reason for this is the new skill Vidir Strike, which is the Airstrike flow that was added. That skill, its damage is absolutely insane for PvE in Succession. Not as much for Awakening, and the reason for that is your base damage on Prime Airstrike is very high. 11, almost 1200 damage on that, and the Vidir Strike does double whatever your airstrike damage is. In Awakening, it's like 624 in the mid 600s for it, so it's going to double that amount, so it doesn't quite hit as hard if you're unfamiliar with it, but Vidir Strike hits incredibly hard in PvE for Succession's build. It also is going to get you back attacks. It doesn't have collision with it, so it'll put you directly behind the mobs, so when you actually use the flow, so you can be facing them on the airstrike portion, which will give you that extra DP and the back attack damage, and then your Vidir Strike is actually going to land back attack and set you up for your follow-up skill from there when you're in the rotation. So really handy to have the DP. It pairs extremely well. I know everyone's used to seeing that on Legacy. Pairs extremely well because Vidir Strike also has the benefit of having the same minus 20 DP that you see Spirit Legacy have. So you're going to pick up your maximum DP loss there on the mobs and score a little extra bonus damage with your back attack. That's also going to go well because prior to that in the skill rotation, as you'll see later on, we use Comma Slash, so we'll have the critical hit damage modifier added on as well for that. So we've got standard monster AP plus 20 because obviously we're Succession DK. We don't have actual usable tier 3 add-ons, and then critical hit damage 3% on that. I did try, just to mention, I tried to make Corrupt Ground work. The issue with Corrupt Ground, it's like okay-ish damage for PvE. I mean, maybe even a little less than okay, especially because we don't have crit options on it. The damage is not amazing. It's fine, it's quick enough to use, but you just keep running. I really tried to make it work. You keep running into problems with that 20-second cooldown. It just doesn't make sense to be basing an entire add-on slot around that. This next one you can kind of judge based on where you're grinding and what kind of setup you have. You can see that I've slanted balance at plus 4% accuracy and minus 4% evasion rate. The reason for this is pretty much the only pulling skill I ever use in PvE because, of course, in Succession we have a range slanted balance, which is incredibly good, and then specifically a place like Bloody Monastery, which has a very high accuracy requirement. Strongly recommend using Garmoth.com, calculating out your accuracy hit rate with all of your buffs on to make sure. This was just an excellent way, since not only range, it actually has pretty good cone damage in general as far as left to right, not just forward to backward, how far back the mobs are. So this was extremely useful at specifically Bloody Monastery. You have some pulls and things where there's 2 packs of mobs that you want together. So you first just initially pull with them, then go into your setup skills, and then start your actual skill rotation once you have them grouped properly from there. So I went with those hit rate increases from there. If you want to stick it in somewhere else and use Shadow Strike or something like that to pull, you can. I'm just going to tell you, this thing also got 100% PvE crit added to it, so it not only is an amazing pull skill that you can use every pack thanks to its incredibly low cooldown, but the damage is actually really relevant, so highly recommend using that one if you're not. This next one's probably going to be the most controversial one to use in it. You could probably directly swap this out for Ravage Rake if you're not a fan of the Wheel of Fortune after the PvE crit loss on it. We did lose 50% base PvE crit rate on it. It does impact the damage pretty heavily for it. However, I again am a fan here of the incredibly long, short cooldown, and then also the AoE effect that we get it. It's very, very large that it hits. So this is a really nice skill to start the skill rotation from here. Get some important buffs that we want. That critical hit rate, obviously, Wheel of Fortune always wanted that when on it, but it definitely wants it now because it's dying. And then we want that attack speed to be up for sure right at the start. So I prefer to use it there. You can swap to Ravage Rake, and when we get into the skill rotation, I'll kind of explain how Ravage Rake could be used pretty interchangeably with Wheel of Fortune if you want to do that instead. Next one up is kind of just for cleaning up mobs towards the end of the rotation. Twilight Dash lost its PvE crit in Succession build, unfortunately. So the damage, this one to me personally, just because of the way that I use Twilight Dash, if you're familiar with the past videos, I use it to clean up mobs and move to my next pack. That's why I like to put the extra movement speed on it bonus so that I'm just going pack to pack. Not as relevant as, like, say, Sycraia, where your mob density, as far as how spread out they are, not very spread out on main rotation, a little bit more on statue rotation, but nothing like Monastery, where you're Bloody Monastery, where you're kind of jumping around packs. And let's be honest, you're always, whether you're on castle or you're on the field rotation, you're going to be extending into the forest rotation at some point, or you'll get a weapon you'll be going through. You want to be able to get across that transition as fast as possible. Just a preference thing, but I like to have that movement speed. The monster damage being on it, just because it's going to allow me to have that add-on already in effect, even when I'm doing my pull skills or my setup skills at the beginning of the rotation, since I'm just kind of moving pack to pack into killing whatever last 5-10% of HP. Took a little bit of adjustment after the crit loss on this one to gauge the proper amount of HP, but eventually got there after some practice. And then Spirit Legacy, you can see on here I have human damage on this. Again, this is because I was using this at Bloody Monastery. You can, of course, change that out to something, and you notice that I have another attack casting speed. Purpose for this was I wanted that to be up 100% uptime, and depending on what I'm doing in between other mobs, that wasn't necessarily the case for it, so I just wanted to make sure that that was up at all times. I don't necessarily always Wheel of Fortune at the same time, or I'll use Spirit Legacy as a cleanup skill, so it works somewhat functionally as maybe last bits of damage. Legacy kills a mob, there's one mob with 10% HP, I can just Twilight Dash, and now I dash straight into the next pack. I've already got my monster damage, human damage, and attack speed ready to go when I do just my pull rotation, so a little bit of extra damage there. Those can be kind of modified a little bit there, not as necessary with the skill rotation that we're going to be running. So with that said, that's kind of breakdown of the add-ons, why I'm using those. Let's get into the skill rotation here. I'll walk you through that, and then you'll kind of see how these add-ons are going to stack, moving pack to pack, and then at the end I'll have some more footage of just grinding in general, so you can kind of see transition and how that's working. So let's jump over there. All right, so we're ready to cover skill rotation. Before that, if you're not familiar with my guides for PvE here, I wanted to find just a couple of terms that I did use a few times in the add-on section for this, and these are going to be setup skills, pulling skills, although that one's kind of self-explanatory, and then cleanup skills. What these are skills that obviously pulling skills are pulling skills, right? You have a few options, but I strongly recommend, again, slanted balance damage is very good, low cooldown, right? So you're just rocking that bad boy with a really short cooldown. The range is going to hit mobs all the way to back here. You can line them up directly that way. You can stand in front of a pack that's right here, have the second pack pulled here, and just hit absolutely everything from there. Get your accuracy buff going, get a minus evasion on them if you need it. For Bloody Monastery, whatever you've modified it to, if you're not at Bloody Monastery or you don't need the evasion, whatever, or you can just be going, if there's a pack from this side, I can hit them real quick with a slanted balance, shadow bullet or something if I want to hear, and I'm ready for that pack as it starts to converge onto the other one. Of course, you do, as I mentioned just now, shot up bullets an option. You have Obsidian Ashes, it being slower, it doesn't feel exactly great, and of course the classic Shadow Strike all have much longer cooldowns, so we're not in setup with these having any skill add-ons. So again, just strongly recommend that slanted balance and then go from there. As far as what a setup skill is, that phrase, the way that I use it, is exactly that. If we have a pack of mobs here, let's say we're Monastery, so we got 2 packs, 4 or 5 dudes here, 4 or 5 dudes here, right? I want to converge them into a single pack as quickly as possible while dealing as much damage as I can. So in this scenario, I can pull this pack, and now I've moved over to the second pack. The time that it's going to take them, there's a few seconds, maybe a second and a half, 2 seconds or so, where this pack is moving over to here, and not all of my skills are going to be able to reach them. So these are what I'm going to call setup skills from here. These are skills you kind of use that aren't a necessity to your actual skill rotation. They're not truly in the skill rotation itself, but just skills that are relevant to use rather than just standing in Q block for, you know, a second or two because we're doing no damage, right? So let's just use a few skills that make sense to use in that time to get set up, get our add-ons initially put in. After the buffs, the Ravage Rake damage and the speed, more importantly, that it's effective, is pretty good here. So I typically use that. I'll pull both the packs and then I'll stand in front of the other pack and I'll kind of Ravage Rake. I'm usually 2 to 3 hits unless if for some reason it was an exceptionally long pull. There is one in the forest rotation I can think of that off the top of my head that's pretty long from there. So maybe I'll go for the 4th hit. I'm not wild about the 4th hit, not because of a damage thing. It's just the wind up and the movement. So if I'm positioned where I want to be to start my skill rotation, the 4th hit, if we go to it, you can see how the character moves forward quite a bit, and then the wind up, because you're moving forward, takes a little bit more time. It's a little bit slower, and then it feels just kind of clunky chaining directly into another skill directly after it. It just feels a little nicer if I do it on the 2nd or 3rd hit and then jump into my Wheel of Fortune from there. Wheel of Fortune, again, don't have to use it. You could potentially stick with just Ravage Rake if you want to. I really like it because that range is going to hit them as they're still positioning. At that point, if I just throw a couple hits of Ravage Rake in, and then I can Wheel of Fortune from here, now I've got my buffs up that I want to go ahead and start my combo. So that's how I'm going to set up while those mobs are getting ready for it. Again, we're dealing with very low cooldowns, so it's not like super relevant to anything else in the actual rotation. Our true rotation is going to start as they're just getting settled to group. I want to charge up a full Comma Slash as I've been standing in front of the packs while I'm doing that, and I'm going to dusk behind them and let go of the Comma Slash. So we've got critical hit damage on that. We're also going to apply a back attack. Comma Slash with that critical hit buff we got off the Wheel of Fortune is going to have a 100% crit rate for PvE on it, and it's going to hit incredibly hard as a back attack at that point. So that's exactly why we want to do that. So we've got a little setup going. We're going to wheel, and then we're ready to start. We charge that up. We dusk, boom, back attack right away. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unveil Dagger. So I'm going to just tap my F key, and then I'm immediately going to press W to go straight into Airstrike. And then I'm going to go ahead and use Vidir Strike, the new skill, to damage right away. So it's going to go, obviously it'll collide with the mobs, and then I'll Vidir Strike. When that Vidir Strike hits, I'm going to go to the back of the mobs, right? So as I've used that, the Airstrike will collide with the mobs. I'll stand here, I'll do the Airstrike, and then I will end up here. The same time you land here, right after the end of that Vidir Strike, you want to flip your camera so that you're facing them, because we're going to go ahead and throw a Spirit Legacy in very quickly, but we want to make sure it lands right away as a back attack, and we're not facing our camera the opposite direction of the mobs, of course. So we'll go in, Unveiled Airstrike, Vidir Strike, and I'm going to flip the camera and immediately Spirit Legacy. From there, you can actually throw another Slanted Balance into it if you want to. It's going to be off cooldown 100%, even if you used it to pull, thanks to the very low cooldown on it. Like I said, it is pretty good damage here. It does make sure that you did get your evasion -% on everything, because, you know, some mobs you may have aggroed just by standing there, and then you pulled the others with Slanted Balance. So that's just going to ensure that you did get that debuff if you're using it that way. If you don't have that on it, not as important, but it's relevant damage at that point. So after the Slanted Balance, we're just going to Pervasive and go ahead and Enforcement. From here, we can wheel, or you can just go straight into Lunacy Vidir. You can even Nocturne the Vidir, press the A key for the new flow. It's pretty good damage if you do the A key from that point. And at this point, we've got a full reset on our skills. We can run the entire combo all over again. We can Twilight Dash away, kill off whatever's left. In reality, this is a lot of DPS, so you're not going to need to get that far unless you happen to be pretty low AP compared to the spot that you're grinding. Just for instance, it was extremely common. You'll see in some of the clips later. I pretty much killed the mobs by the time I was using Vidir Strike, and I maybe had to use Spirit Legacy to finish them off. Or if I missed a mob, then Twilight Dash away and would chip damage them off. So we're literally talking about just a few seconds for how long this takes because you have so much damage. Just want to give you that full combo kind of extension should you need a little bit more juice, or maybe you had a third pack that got aggroed while you're attacking that second pack and the first few died. Whatever the case may be, if you need the extension, that's kind of how it is. So we get our pull going, we get set up, couple of skills here, we're ready to start. We'll go Comma Slash from behind. We're going to get into Vidir Strike, Owl Legacy. There's honestly nothing that's going to survive at that point, but you can of course extend if you need to, however you want. You can skip that guy if you want to. We can throw a Twilight Dash in there. Nothing's living past that point, and if they are, maybe consider grinding in a different zone, since we've got pretty high damage to be put out from that point. So try that out and test it, see how you like it. That Vidir Strike is kind of what the build for those add-ons are built around. We want to make sure that Vidir Strike's hitting incredibly hard, and then just following up with a huge legacy as a back attack with crit damage, with back attack, with minus DP across the board. And obviously you need to have a 100% hit rate whenever available. It's done extremely, extremely well. So if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments down below on that skill rotation, the add-ons that I'm using. As far as numbers, no weapon, no bells at Bloody Monastery. Which I think it's sometimes we overlook the point that bells spawn as well. Skipping bells and skipping weapons was doing right around 15,000 trash per hour on this setup at 305 Kutum. Now that does have some variance with LV. I just literally skip over weapons and skip the bells to have it. My actual average was like 14,885 after many, many hours doing it. And then in Sycraia, we were running it right at about 7.5 on a blue loot scroll, no Agris for that one, using this setup in succession. Again, 305 Kutum. So let me know what kind of numbers you guys are pulling with that. If you got some other things, obviously, like I said, this isn't the end all be all. This is just specifically the setup that was working best for me with that skill add-on setup in this skill rotation. I was just incredibly shocked by how hard Vidir Strike is hitting. The loss of the crit on Twilight Dash really felt bad. I had a really difficult time initially gauging how much damage I could do to a mob as I was leaving it. And what I mean by that is I had 1 or 2 mob stragglers or something that, you know, didn't get hit by the first couple skills if I was a little too early. And my next pack that I'm going to is over here. Normally I could just Twilight Dash, no problem. They used to be able to have like 20-25% HP. Twilight Dash would just annihilate them, no problem. And I'm already at my next pack. Single skill, both movement, and use it as a cleanup skill to clean up that last bit of HP. Except that now it's a different thing. They need to be 10% or so to actually make sure that they're going to die. There were a few times where I Twilight Dash away. They didn't quite die. I don't want to go back to kill them, so that's where I'm Shadow Striking just to finish off the HP. That one did hurt. Wheel of Fortune did as well. I actually tried a few iterations where I took it out of the skill rotation altogether, but with the low cooldown, it was kind of fine to just go ahead and use it, at least setting up those early skill add-ons, getting that critical hit damage, since Vidir Strike is kind of the big dick damage these days, and that guy doesn't have a critical hit modifier on it, so picking up a little bit extra crit where you can on that one is a really, really big deal. But yeah, try that out. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to run a few more clips of just some grind I did at Bloody Monastery at the end, just so you can see some real-world interaction of the actual skill rotation itself. Just to note, you'll see that I don't get very far into the rotation. When I pull multiple packs is when I'll actually start using Pervasive Enforcement at that point, since by the time you're on Vidir Strike, Spirit Legacy, you've dealt so much damage. But if you did enjoy the video, be sure to like it. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you get notifications when new videos do go live. And if you'd like to catch me playing live, there is a link to my Twitch page in the description down below. You can jump on over there, drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. With that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.